Hello everyone. I hope you guys are doing really well in this quarantine. I am Gurudat, assistant professor in Indraprasth Law College, and as we must be observing that we are uploading videos on a regular basis. So this video is also part of that initiative. That although our classes are suspended, the academic work should continue in electronic form in online mode. So in this video, we'll be starting revision lectures through this video in public international law, which is the sixth semester subject in BLLB course. In public international law, we have basically six chapters. First is theoretical aspects of international law. Second is sources of international law. Third is international law and municipal law. The fourth is state recognition in international law. Fifth is law of war, and sixth is law of sea. So from this lecture, we'll be starting the revision series of this subject. In this video, we will cover chapter 1, that is theoretical aspect of public international law. The first question is, what is public international law? So in international law, we can divide international law in two parts. The first one is private international law, and second one is public international law. While the private international law covers law which regulate the citizen in the international world. For example, how marriage in one country will be governed in another country. For example, how immigration laws will be concerned. These things are a part of private international law. In public international law, which we'll study in public international law, the relationship between different nations and international organizations are governed. Therefore, it is also called as law of the nations. So, public international law and law of the nations are synonymous. They are equivalent terms, often interchangeably used with each other. Now, the first person to use public international law was Jeremy Bentham in 1789. Uh, he used this word in his book Principles of Morals and Legislations, which was published in 1789. So from that onward, people started using public international law. Before that, the term which was used was law of the nations, as we have already discussed that it is synonymous. So various different scholars have given their own definition of public international law. Uh, and often they don't agree with each other. Some include only states in public international law. Some include state as well as international personalities in public international law. Some say that it is only observed because states give their consent to it. Others say it is binding. Some say it has developed from customs, while others say it has developed from treaties and usages. So there are many definitions. We'll just read out few of them, a few of the famous ones. By Oppenheim, he says that law of the nations of international law is the name of body is the name for the body of customary law and conventional rules which are considered binding by civilized states in their intercourse with each other. So Oppenheim is including only civilized states in his definition. He is ignoring international bodies, international organizations like MNCs and UN, WHO, all those bodies. He's ignoring them. Similarly, Alf Ross is also ignoring bodies. As you may read, international law is the body of legal rules binding upon states in their relations with each other. So one thing, while watching this video, do pause the video and write down the definitions. These definitions you have to remember at least by 2-3 scholars for good marks. If certainly a question is asked in exam that define international law, then apart from giving your own definition, you have to at least give 2-3 definitions by eminent scholars that will boost your marks. Third, by Lawrence, according to him, international law is the rules which determines the conduct of general body of civilized state in their mutual dealings. Then in Queen versus King, you may read it out. Then important thing is we have to. Then let's come to the modern definition. But you just pause the video and write down these definitions by your own, because you have to learn them, and at least 2-3. You have to learn 2-3 definitions and you have to write it down in exam for good marks. Now, the current modern definition, which is accepted currently. In the modern day definition, we may define international law as contemporary international law includes those rules and norms that regulate the conduct of states and other entities which at the given point are recognized as possessing international personalities. So, in modern definitions, we are covering nearly every international personality, which may include multinational corporations, international bodies like UN, ASEAN, uh, BRICS, plus states like India, Pakistan, America, and China. So the current in under the current definition, certain three things are must which should be included. First, that states as well as international personalities have to be included. Second, the international law should regulate the conduct of the above two and among themselves also. The third is they feel bound to follow these rules and norms. The third is also very important, that these states, these international organizations must feel bound to observe these rules. These rules should not be only consensual. They should be bound. They should feel bound to observe these rules. For example, even if I don't want to follow this rule, for example, even if China doesn't want to follow any international law, then also it has to follow it. Then only that certain thing will become international law. Now, one of the biggest controversy in this chapter, in this concept, in this chapter is whether international law is true law or not. Certain scholars feel that international law is true law, but there are others which feel that international law is not true law. Uh, so there are two schools. First is positivist, and second is historical or modern view. The positivist or the traditional scholars, they think that international law is not proper law. This school includes Austin, Jeremy Bentham, Hobbes, Holland, and Pfaffendorf. The second school, historic or a modern school, they think that international law is proper law. They include Oppenheim, Hall, Lawrence, Savigny, Henry Maine, and Stark. Now, first let's talk about positivist. Why positivists think that this is not a true law? Basically, because anything to become a law has to pass certain test. One of the most important test is sanction. That how what will happen if you don't follow the law. For example, in India we have a law. We have law that if we don't wear helmet, then we will be fined. This is the law of India. So anybody who doesn't wear helmet while driving is fined. So this fine is sanction. This fine forces us to wear helmet even if we want or if we don't want. But these scholars, positive scholars, they think in international law this sanction is missing. Every law is followed by consent of the nation. For example, if India want to follow, then it will follow certain international law. If it doesn't want to follow, it will not follow it. Therefore, sanction is missing. Therefore, international law is not true law as per positivist school. Now, second school is historic or modern school. They think that international law is proper law. They argue that although there is no proper sanction in international law, still states and international organizations feel bound to follow it. Again, India's example. India may not be forced by any country to follow international law, but still, out of its goodwill, out of its consent, it follow international law. This shows that international law is a true law because people feel bound to follow it. Now, statement by three prominent scholars, which often come into exam. From exam point of view, these three statements are really important. The first one from Austin. Austin says that international law is not true law and it is merely positive international morality. Why positive international morality? Because as per Austin, every state, every organization which follow international law, it follow it only because of its consent. If it don't want to follow it, it will not follow it. Therefore, it is only the morality of the nations which force them to follow this law and not any superior authority. Therefore, it is just positive morality. Now, Holland says that international law is vanishing point of jurisprudence. Now, I hope that you know the meaning of vanishing point. Vanishing point is that point at which two parallel lines meet. Okay, it's a mathematical concept. I hope you know that. If you don't know that, please Google it. Now, according to Holland, international law is vanishing point because it is followed only by courtesy of the nation. It is the courtesy of the nation which forced them to follow it, and no other superior authority. Again, quite similar to what Austin thinks. Therefore, it is not a true law in the true sense. The third one is Stark. As per Stark, international law is true law but it is not a very strong law. This is the most acceptable definition of international law which we can think. He Stark very accept that although there are certain key elements in international law which is missing, but it is true law. For example, five things are there which Stark think are missing in international law, but still he considered it as a law. The first thing is sanction, as we have already discussed it. The second thing is there are no court to decide legal disputes in international law. For example, in India, if certain legal dispute arises, we can go to local court, high court, supreme court. But in international law, there are no exact courts to solve these problems. Although we have an international court of justice, but you must know that in international court of justice, only cases will be filed when both the parties consent to it. For example, if there is a dispute between India and Pakistan, they can go to International Court of Justice only when both the parties agree to it. If India says it doesn't want to go to International Court of Justice, the case can't be heard in International Court of Justice. Therefore, the court system, the legal dispute mechanism is missing in international law. The third is uh, enforcement measures which are available in international law are very weak. For example, if Sri Lanka doesn't follow any law, then enforcement mechanism, then how to force Sri Lanka to follow it is very weak in international law. Fourth is rules of international law are frequently violated by states, and claimant of rights take the law into in their own hands. This is also very problematic thing in international law. Often stronger nations like China, America, UK, Russia, they often violate the international law rules and no actions are taken against them. For example, China attacked, America attacked Afghanistan, Russia attacked Ukraine, UK has been not following international law in the case of many law past cases. Even today, China is asserting its right on South China Sea and not following international law. So these stronger nations manipulate international law. This is also very problematic thing in international law, and therefore many scholars don't think that it is a true law in sense. Now the fifth problem is uh, effectiveness of municipal law lies in the fact that its units are quite weak. So in this law, that the every state considers its municipal law, that is its local law, supreme. And when supreme and local law, and for example, in India we have a Indian law. Okay, now in India's Indian law, local law is in contradiction with some international law. So what will happen in that case? So in that particular case, Indian law will be superior to that of international law. So this is also a problem, as per which international law is not granted status of true law, because often municipal law are considered superior to it. We will understand the difference between municipal law and international law in chapter 3. But for just example, consider that you have a if there is international law that nobody will be arrested without trial or without charge sheet. But this is the international law, but India has made a law under UAPA under which citizens can be arrested without any trial for 6 months. Now, India's law will be followed in India and not the international law. This shows that international law is often weak when compared to municipal law, and therefore, uh, uh, people think that it is not a true law. Now, next point, basis of international law. One school of jurists have viewed that so basically there are two schools which differ on what is the basis of international law. The first is of naturalist and the second is of positivist. The naturalists think that international law is based on morals, on laws of the nature, on reason, on God, and the prominent supporters are Grotius, Pufendorf, and Vettel. While positivists think that international law is only and only based on consent of the nation and nothing else. The prominent supporters are Brinkershuk and Zelotti. Now, certain functions of international law. This is also very important, that why we should have international law. Of course, the first point is maintenance of international peace and security. As we can see that especially after Second World War, many nations tried to formulate international law. so that conflict can be solved in peaceful manner instead of war. The second point is development of friendly relations among states and international actors. Now, if we have international law, then it regulates our conduct with each other. So the chances of a conflict become less, and we grow friendly relations between each others, between different nations, between different international organizations. Achievement of international corporations to solve problems. For example, in recent coronavirus crisis, now the whole international community is following the international law and helping each other. So this whole problem can be solved easily when we help each other instead of when we work in isolation of each other. Now, fourth is to solve economic, cultural, and humanitarian problems. For example, refugee crisis. Today, war in one country can definitely affect the conditions in other country. So, this international law smoothens this reconciliation process, how things will work in case of any conflict or any problem. Fifth is to guarantee political and sovereign integrity of the states. Now, before international law, it was often seen that stronger states could easily capture weaker states. Now, with the international law in picture, even the stronger states has to justify its action. For example, America had to justify its action when it was attacking Afghanistan. So, international law forces even the stronger ones to respect the sovereignty and integrity of the weaker states. All right. So, in this chapter, we have covered a definition of international law and nature of international law, plus how scope of international law, plus basis of international law. Now, in the next chapter, we will be studying, next video, we will be studying the sources of international law. Thank you.